how to define your project supply chain to be successful. My name is Guilherme and I'm a project management specialist. I help professionals to become successful project managers. Before I start, this content is part of the warm-up for the Project Management Summit. There's a free event that I'm going to make with 4 sessions where I'm going to talk about a lot of project management topics and show you how you can sharpen your skills and how you can develop your career there. If you're interested in that, click in the link below here in the description and subscribe. Again, everything is free, but there's the only catch is the content will be available only in that week. So go ahead, sign and don't miss it. The topic I'm going to talk about today, of course, is supply chain, procurement, and I'm going to talk about that topic in the optic of a project, things that you need to be careful in a project. Of course, supply chain and procurement can be a very broad topic, but my focus here is talking about the focus and of those items into a project perspective. So let's start. First of all, of course, during the planning phase, you are defining the scope of your project, but then you need to make a very important decision there. For each of those items that you have in your WBS, WBS, if you do not know, stands for Work Breakdown Structure. Basically, you need to make a decision, make or buy decision. What does that mean? You are going to make it, the company itself it's going to make it, or you need to buy from a supplier. For a lot of times, this decision can be very simple. Why? Because for a lot of items that you usually buy, the company that you are working on or the company that are executing the project, they cannot execute themselves. For example, if you're thinking about a car it's a project, and if you think about any big OEM, let's give an example here, for example, BMW, they do not build or they do not produce all the components by themselves. They need to buy a lot of the components. Some of them they can do it internally, but some of them they buy. So the decision, usually make or buy decision, can be very straightforward. Of course, there are some situations, for example, you make a buy decision, for example, you're going to hire an external company to develop a design, but you also have the competence to develop the design internally. But that's a strategic vision, considering the research that the company have, considering price, speed, and a lot of other things, and maybe even expertise. That's something very different that you want to do, or that's something that's not part of your core business. So the make and buy decisions, usually that can be a bit easier. Of course, I had some projects in the past that this decision was a bit more tricky. For example, I was working in energy projects, energy infrastructure to build substations. Basically, it was engineering, procurement, and construction projects. One of the things that I had in my WBS, for example, it was a circuit breaker, high voltage circuit breaker there. So the company I was working on, they also had a factory that they would produce the circuit breaker there. So the question is, there was also any kind of internal political discussion. Should we buy from a competitor or should we buy internally this item? But in most of the case, this is a simple decision. What does it make? Okay, basically you can look that you buy our products. Products, it can be components to assemble a product, can be, or you can hire a company to assemble everything to you. Then you buy a sub-assembly there for the company, or depending on how much you place this assembly, can be half product, half services, but for sake of simplicity, I put under product here. But you can buy material, in this case for the APC projects I was working on. I bought like cables, structures, isolators, and all the type of stuff. I bought equipment like transformer, circuit breaker, disconnect switches, protection control systems, automation systems, and a bunch of more stuff. Of course, if you are working a product, you usually have a bill of material, what's called the BOM, and in the BOM you have the components that you need to buy. And then it can be connectors, it can be pins, O-rings, and you name it. But you can hire services. What are those services? It can be you're hiring a construction service, you can hire an assembly, a commissioning. That's, in this case, I was talking about, of course, engineering, procurement, and construction projects. But you also can buy tests. Like when a lot of the projects that I'm working on, I have a testing for qualification to qualify that the quality of the product is good. Sometimes you hire an external lab to do the testing service for you. You also can hire designers, or you can hire all types of manpower. The idea is, once you have more clarity in your scope there, you are going to, when you are working the planning, then you have the scope there, you start to say, okay, those items, you make all this make or buy decision for each item that you have in the WBS. And of course, everything that you need to buy it, you have a different way to approach it. Then you need to have a plan, a procurement, an assessment with your procurement or supply chain team, and so on. Then what you're going to do, you're going to check the existing supply base, if you have suppliers that they can supply that for you, if you need to develop a new supply base, and so on. If it's a new component, capabilities and everything else. But let me just move here. So what are the items that you need to consider to select a supplier? First of all, of course, with what you mentioned, the technical capability. Is the supplier capable of producing or this product or executing this service in the quality that I needed? This is very important item because even though if you receive quotes from suppliers, you should not assume that they have a technical capability for doing something. It's very good if you check what are the technical capabilities there. And ways to check it, you can ask your technical lead or your designer, can be a process engineer, to have an assessment with the supplier, to visit the supplier, to have meetings. There's all types of different ways to assess technical capability, to look for similar service that they executed, to look for similar products that they produced. But the technical capability is key. If you do not have a supplier that you have confidence in the technical capability, don't go there. Even if it's the cheapest and fastest supplier, because in the end you're going to end up having problems. And believe me, I've seen organizations taking supplier decisions based on cost, which leads to problems for the future. So then your technical capability is very important that you assess that with your team. Of course, you need to assess the cost for the supplier. The cost can be a unit cost for something that you are buying, an hourly cost, but also depending on what you're doing, the supplier request, there's an investment required there. Quite commonly, depending on the type of product that you're buying, for example, if it's a plastic connector, the supplier will tell you, I have the equipment, I have the knowledge, but you're asking me for something that's custom made, then I need to make a tool for that with the specific dimensions that you want. And then, of course, you need to pay for this tool. There's always different ways to negotiate it. You can say, I do not pay the investment, but then your unit price goes up. That's always life. But you need to understand that. And it might be tool lifetime and this kind of stuff that you need to be aware of, and you need to take it into consideration while you are selecting a supplier. But for cost, unless you are missing the cost that you are going to do there, most of companies, they look for cost always. Just very important that you compare all the costs that are there and they're relevant for your project. Because if you compare just part of the cost, for example, if you just compare the unit price without thinking about the investment, you can end up with very different numbers there from different suppliers. The next point, of course, the lead time. If you want to execute a project, usually you have an expectation on lead time, and you have maybe a customer request when they want to do that, or you have a pressure to time to market. So it's very important that you take the lead time into consideration, because I've seen very, very good suppliers that they're very good technically, cost-wise, they are in the right range, but their lead time is way longer than all the other suppliers. Which in the end, it's basically a no-go, because if you have a hard requirement in the project for a lead time, you cannot just select the supplier with the longest lead time there that cannot fulfill what you need for your project. Of course, in some cases you might not have options. Then you need to find how you're going to adapt your project time plan and your expectation there. But that's something that it's good to know already in the planning phase. Um, Other item to be selected is quality there. And quality you can see in different ways. Of course, if you have already experience with the supplier, it's much easier to assess their quality. And quality, it can be the quality of the product, the quality of the service, but can be responsiveness and there if you have an issue. It can be support in case you have questions. So quality can entail a lot of things, including how the quality of the support that you get from the supplier. But also you can think about quality issues that you have in production. For example, in one of my projects in the past, when we were doing a supplier selection where the sourcing team they want to steer to this direction, but they were already a supplier, then I checked their quality level. Basically, I did check with my quality team there, my quality responsible, their PPM levels. PPM stands for part per million. That means the PPM level I'm trying to measure like the number of defective parts per million. So I see that they had a very high PPM, which of course impact the quality of what we are going to be supplied, and it creates a lot of problem in the manufacturing process that we had there. So that was already okay. Their PPM it's way high, and way high. I was talking at some point that they had for quality rejects there, maybe around 3 or 4% of all the parts that they sent to us. So if you are looking for mass production where you're going to produce millions of pieces, 3 and 4%, it's way high to do that. Something very important to consider there, financial health of the supplier. Even if it's a supplier that's already existing in your supply base. And I always highlight that. And then of course, and that's one of the reasons why I mentioned that you as a project manager you should have at least a decent understanding on finance and how finance works. And that's also why when I do my own training, I have a part that I call the corporate finance to give at least some basics under so you as a project manager can understand that. And I'm saying that because I've already had a situation there that in the middle of my project, the supplier declared bankruptcy. And with this supplier, I had 4 different projects running there. So basically, I was a program manager developing the global supply chain for the company for automotive business. So I had 4 projects running there. Some of those projects I had more of the one component that the supplier was making, and this supplier was part of the supply base of the company. And at some point, they were considered even a strategic partner for the company I was working on. And then suddenly they declare bankruptcy. And then of course, my project went automatically to red, high risk, but everything else they were doing for the company ended up like in a red alert stage. Because if they stop working there, then you have a big problem. And you might say, okay, but that did happen in a difficult market or that didn't happen in a non-developed country. No, the supplier was located in Germany and the market was quite good. The problem was mismanagement inside of their company. Of course, as a project manager, you're not going to discuss how the company they are managing themselves. That's also not your business as a customer. But financial health is quite important, mainly. And if in this case, automotive business, what we were developing and what we were released as part of our projects there, those were things that we were planning to run for the next 5, 10, 15 years. And if you have a supplier that you do not know that's going to operate even tomorrow, everything that we were doing under product development, qualification, supply chain setting up, that was worthless because we would have to do everything again with another supplier. So that's a very important item. One of other item that's quite important to take into consideration is location. And location, it can be a strategic decision. Maybe you want to reduce like your supply chain footprint because of course transporting goods across the world, you have carbon emission there. Then it's always good to reduce your footprint when you think about location. But also thinking about, at least at the point I'm recording this video, there's a lot of geopolitical tension around the world. A few years ago, we had kind of trade war between the US and China, where the US created extra tariffs, and meaning that producing items in China to deliver to customers in the US was more expensive, and there was an extra cost that no customer would want to pay. Then basically you need to reshift your global supply chain footprint if you can do that. So thinking your global supply chain footprint there, it's very important. But there's also, when you talk about the geopolitical tension there, that's also, for example, Taiwan. Right now I'm working in the semiconductor industry, at least at the point I'm recording this video again. And probably the biggest fabs that they can produce the silicon to produce the semiconductor, they are located in Taiwan. And the tension between China and Taiwan does not help, because if all your supply chain is there and suddenly something goes wrong there, basically you stop your business. And of course, in this case, would be a war, might escalate, and there's other impacts. But what's quite important for you here, that the location can be quite relevant for thinking about on CO2 emission footprint, think about geopolitical, but also thinking in items like just in time. If it's always better to have a supplier that's close to your factory, because then you can have lower stocks and you can look for a more just in time production that will make your manufacturing a bit more lean. Or even for services, right? It's much easier to have a company that's doing qualification for you, that's your neighbor, that you can just go there very easy to discuss with them face to face and to see in case you have any issues, than having a test done the other side of the world. So very important decision. And this is, to be clear, I'm not saying that you as a project manager, you're going to think about all those items by yourself. You are going to have a team there. But you as a project manager, you need to think about it, because you can ask those questions to your team. Does not mean that you are going to have the supply chain strategy in your project. Sometimes you get the strategy already ready because the company has a supply chain department that's defining the global supply chain strategy. But at least you can ask the question, hey, is that a good idea for this project if it's a project that we need to go really fast to outsource this to a supplier that's located, I don't know, in China, and in this case I'm in Europe. Then you have the time zone issues to have meetings and everything else. Would be better to have a supplier that's also located very close by, maybe Germany, maybe Italy, Poland, or whatever place that's faster, same time zone. And sometimes you are going to see that the cost also, maybe the cost does not pay the risk to have this very weird location. And another very important item, it's of course the business relation with the supplier. Why I'm saying that? Because if it's a new supplier for you, there's always a risk and there's always a learning curve that you need to have to working together. But there's also another perspective. If you're buying something from a company that's too big or much bigger than your own company, or that you have very small amount of business with them, in case of prioritization, in case of negotiation, your leverage there is not much. For example, if you buy something from a company like BASF, BASF, it's a huge chemical company in the world. And if you have orders for them, like the orders of few thousands of euros per year, for them it's nothing. So if you have an issue there, you are always low in their priority list. And I understand that sometimes you really not have the option. I've been there. I've worked in developing supply chain So meaning new suppliers, new equipments, new factories for different places around the world. But I've worked on developing basically a new business unit for a new market where basically the existing supply base was not capable of doing something. Then I had a project, a big program there with a lot of suppliers, and most of them they were completely new for the company. But the business relationship it's very important there, because what kind of priority you can get if you need to push it, what kind of leverage that you have to negotiate. This is very important, like because if you are 0.001% of their business, your leverage, if you say, okay, I'm going to walk away, okay, just go ahead. But if you have, I don't know, 10-15% of of their sales, because you are buying a lot of stuff of them, then you have quite different relation. Of course, you can look for the relation the other way around to be a to have you can be a preferred supplier, but you also can look for the other way to be a preferred customer. There's also even studies about that. But it's important that you consider this relationship, because if you're working with a supplier that you have a long-term already business relationship, those companies that have a long-term business relationship, even when things go really wrong, it is easier to get the right focus and the right attention. And sometimes I'll also do the right responsibility, say, hey, you mess up here, you call, there's an extra cost, and sorry, but you need to pay for that. And of course, if those companies there, they have been working together for years and the relationship is growing, they are buying a lot from those suppliers, they're going to understand. Then you get to a level that it's really start to be a partnership, and you start to have much fair negotiation instead of someone just trying to sell it as high as possible and someone trying to buy it as low as possible. It's much better to have this business partnership looking to the long term. More important, even if you're looking to product development, because sometimes you have products that you are going to run for years, or you have components that you plan for buying for 10, 20, 30 years. I've worked in companies with some types of products that even though the technology was, I don't know, 30, 40 years old, we were still developing the supply chain because there was demand for those products. Of course, you make improvements, you improve the technology and so on, but in the end, you are looking for a very long-term relationship. So this is quite important to be considered while you are selecting a supplier. And here a note that all those things that important things that very important inputs that you get from a supplier, you need to add these in the business case. And again, here you're going to see again the connection to finance. Your goal as a project manager is to deliver value. Business case are one of the most common ways that companies use to measure value. So you need to understand how to manage a business case. And of course, your suppliers are a big part of managing those business cases with their inputs, pricing, code terms, quote dates, design reviews, minimum order quantity, type of packaging, and so on. But I'm not going to talk about business case in details here. I'm focusing on the supply chain part and the procurement part. So you think about all those dimensions, but how do you assess it? Well, I'm going to show you a very easy example here, how companies usually work. Some of those items, for example, as financial health, business relationship, they are considered in a different way, or they are kind of considered as a pre-qualification of the supplier, so you can even consider to select them. So this needs to be done. But then how the projects usually work. You have a supplier selection matrix. Here I put a very simple example where you give them a score, a technical score, cost, time, and quality. You have, in this case, 1, 2, 3 suppliers. You define different weights for technical, cost, time, quality. And you combine those weights and you combine a score. And that gives you a pretty good idea on how to select a supplier. Of course, this is a supplier assessment that you're not going to do again by yourself. You do that as a project team, where the technical part, of course, is assessed by the team, but it's technical guys in your team, they have the same there. Because if you have a technical lead, and they're telling you this supplier is not capable, you should listen to them. That's a basic to be a leader there. Of course, the cost part, you get a code for that. Lead time part, you get a code for that, and it's very easy how you're going to add there. The quality part needs to be assessed by the team or by existing data. And existing data can be, as I mentioned, PPM, can be experience in other projects, experience with production, or assessed by the team. Your team did an audit there, your team verified there, but you need to make sure also your supplier, they have minimum quality requirements there. And of course, I use a lot of examples for products, but for construction it works exactly the same way. Because if you are hiring a contractor there, you need to make sure that this contractor has the minimum quality requirements there, that they make sure that they follow all the laws and rules on safety. You need to make sure that they buy and they provide you quality reports, like if you're talking about construction, the concrete quality that you're buying, the specifications, the tests that they need to do in the concrete. Exactly the same thing for the assembly, the reports that they need to provide you for the assembly, the tracking back of the material, or even for the commissioning, exactly the same thing. You have a list of tests that you need to be doing, but you need to make sure that they are doing these tests in the right way, with the right equipment, the equipments are calibrated and everything else. So quality is always important. Why? Because if you forget about quality, you're going to end up having problems with technical cost and time. Quality is the reflection of that. And of course, looking a bit more in the PMBOK perspective right here, if you look in the PMBOK 6th edition where you have the processes there, when you look for the procurement, basically we are going to see that plan the procurement there. That's one process in the planning phase, because that's when you're going to make all those make or buy decisions. Then you're going to have a list of things that you need to buy. You are going to take into consideration, and you are going to move for supplier selection. The supplier selection will be, of course, then you have another procurement process there. That's execute procurement. That's meaning quoting, supplier selection, selecting a supplier, and send orders or contracts. And you have the monitoring part of the procurement. So in the PMBOK, it's very straightforward. You not only have these three, because also there are projects that you do not need to buy anything. There's no procurement, there's no plan, supply chain. For example, if you are developing an app, and then of course might be that you are not going to use waterfall, but if you're developing a service, that you don't need to buy anything. Might mean that you don't need to buy anything, that you have your team, that the team is going to develop and define the service, and that's done. So the PMBOK needs to be general for everything else, but also the PMBOK cannot tell you what to buy or not, because that's a company decision, and the selection can go very different in all different companies around the world. What I'm giving you here is at least a different perspective how selection is done, and maybe you might have some extra items, some less items, but why I'm putting this matrix selection here, to make sure that when you are selecting a supplier, you do not only look for the cost part, because I've seen companies that only look for cost, and if you really make a push, then you take a look on time. Why? Because a lot of times the procurement or the buyers, they have targets and how much they need to save. Then of course they want to buy the cheapest one. Well, if the time does not fit, if the quality does not fit, and if the technical does not fit, don't go there. And who is the owner of this decision can be different from organization to organization. Some organizations, the sourcing team will say, no, that's my decision, you do not get involved with that. But as a project manager, you always have a say. And if you see, even if it's decision, it's not taken collectively with your team there, you just get a decision done there. And if you see those things are not done properly, push back, because this is adding risk to your project and you should be concerned with that. If you have a technical guy there, your technical lead is making an alert there, those company here, they are not capable to executing a project. And don't get me wrong here, I've done projects even myself in the past that I end up hiring a contractor to do a construction part in one of my EPC projects. And because we were short on budget and this guy was the cheapest one, but it ended up that was a problem because he was he was being the cheapest one because he did not want to have an engineer full time working for the project, make sure the construction is done. And we said, okay, as long as you can keep it going, whatever lead that you have on site needs to be capable of executing the work. But in the end, the people that he was putting on site, they were not capable to properly execute a plan and to execute the work. And he was saying, I'm not going to put an engineer because it's outside of my scope. Of course, it was also a new supplier. So this is an example. Then, of course, that ended up bad. In 2 months, we had to take him out of the project, and we need to put another company to execute the work. So sometimes I understand that you are looking for cost because you need to keep your business case, but do not underestimate what you are going to see here. And also about the quality of the service. If you get the service is bad, you are going to need to rework it. You are going to cost you more money to find someone else. You are going to cost more time to do something like that. And I've seen that. I've gone through that myself in projects in the past when because of several reasons we had a push of cost and we decided to take the risk. And I'm telling you, it was a bad decision, and solving the problem costs much more money and time than doing it right the first time. So make sure that you have the right selection matrix there to have the right comparison. Otherwise, people just look straight forward for the cost and time and say, okay, let's go for that one. But this technical and quality part, it starts to be less subjective there. It starts to be more subjective there if you do not have that in the matrix. And then people forget about that and you end up having issues with your project. I hope it's clear for you. If you have questions, you can write here in this post and let me know. Make sure you like this video and share it so more people can learn about procurement, more people can learn about supply chain, more people can learn about project management. Make sure you follow me for more content, but also here on YouTube, but also make sure you follow me for also on Instagram. On Instagram, I share shorter pieces of content that you can see daily there, but I also have a Q&A box open there. You can ask questions every day there. And don't forget to sign up for the Project Management Summit. It's a week where we're going to have longer sessions with this one with much more content, trying to cover a lot of things, relevant things on project management. Make sure that you can be more successful and you can sharpen your skills and progress into your career. Remember, everything is free, but you need to sign up here and the content will be available only this week. I hope you like it. Let me know your feedback. Let me know if you have questions, and I hope to see you soon. Bye.